You're listening to Learning Leader Spotlight, interviews with corporate L&D leaders. On each episode, we sit down with key industry experts to discover more about what's happening in the world of learning and development, from current trends and insights to the most valuable lessons learned along the way. Join us for a fresh perspective on all things training and the best direction forward.
Hi, welcome to the Learning Leader Spotlight, where we interview the learning leaders of today to help inspire the learning leaders of tomorrow. My name is Rick Ransom. I'm your guest host, and I am a relationship manager with Training Pros. Training Pros is a learning and development contract staffing company where we say, when you have more projects than people, let us find the best consultant to start your project with confidence. So I'm excited here today to introduce our guest for today. I've known Joe Leslie for about the last 7.5, going on 8 years, when we worked on the same team, leading implementation of a learning management system, the first on record for a large agency holding company, also known as Publicis Group. Today, Joe Leslie is head global lead of learning and development AI at Golin. Golin is a celebrated award-winning global public relations agency based out of Chicago. So with that, welcome, Joe.
Thank you, Rick. It's great to be here. I'm a big fan of the podcast, and especially catching up with yourself is a great it's a great honor to be here. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I would absolutely agree. It's great to have you and great to see you. So with that, go ahead and share with our audience a 60-second overview of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, sure thing. So as you mentioned, Rick, my current position is leading the AI L&D function at Golin, who are a global PR company. I've kind of fallen into the AI side of things. I've been in conventional L&D roles for 20 years now. And as you mentioned in your intro, Rick, you and I working at Publicis Group, and Publicis were early adopters of AI in 2018. And I kind of been involved in the L&D function at Publicis Group, almost rode the crest of a wave with that kind of strategic initiative for Publicis to gravitate to AI. And because of that, I've kind of found myself in this somewhat of a niche position, which is AI L&D, obviously a reflection of the times and how that technology is moving. So enjoying the role and excited to talk about that today.
So thank you, Joe, for sharing that and for introducing yourself. So share a little bit more in terms of what about learning and development first attracted you to this field.
Yeah, good question, Rick. I mean, I feel like a lot of people in L&D can perhaps relate to this, is that I almost fell into L&D, to be honest. My academic background was in humanities, so I have a master's in politics and international relations. And my first job leaving university in the UK was to work in local government, right, as kind of an extension of that. And I ended up in the education department. And I found myself kind of questioning a lot of things within education, which can be probably applied to the US and other countries as well. For example, I'd be thinking, why don't they teach financial literacy at school? Why don't they teach you about how to organize a mortgage and useful things? And I kind of started being really curious around education. And both my parents were teachers as well. So maybe there was a kind of invisible hand that was guiding me more to kind of education, L&D. But what I really found interesting about corporate L&D is that you could, I kind of had those questions about the traditional education system. In corporate L&D, you have a bit more autonomy. You can actually decide how you want to train people and what you want to focus on, which I really liked. And that was kind of what sort of led me to pursue that particular pathway.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting as with the learning leaders that we've spoken to on this podcast that have had their entry into academia and then that transition to corporate where there's more input and more strategy as it relates to what's being taught and and the subject matter that's being introduced in the classroom.
Yeah. And I think one of the kind of offshoots of that is a bit of a challenge for us in L&D is that anybody in C-suite of a company kind of thinks they know about training because, hey, I went to school, I must know about training. But there's kind of a clear delineation between like education and workplace training. right? So we need to be, instead of being like instructor or teacher centric, like education is, to be kind of user centric and task orientated in the workforce. So I think that's kind of a battle that we have to navigate as L&D professionals, is that everyone thinks they know about training because they went to school. And that's something that we have to sort of vie with a little bit in our world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a big difference in education. Education is not all the same, especially as we get into adult learning theory and how adults learn, and then also bringing it together with the business and with the organization. So,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, with that said, so then what have been some of the changes that you've seen in the last few years as it relates to learning and development within the corporate setting?
Well, I'm afraid I'm going to be terribly predictable here, and I'm going to talk about AI, which, has been part of my job role. I've kind of seen this up close when I was at Publicis, and now I'm at Golin. So Golin are very, very ambitious in terms of AI. They are wanting to be the first fully AI integrated agency by 2026. So it's something that I'm seeing up close a lot. And I do think that's not just my own kind of myopic perception, but I look at the L&D, I'm sure you see this as well, Rick, the L&D sentiment survey that's done every year. It's Donald Taylor and Egla Benauskater do this really great survey, which is like what's hot in L&D, basically. And it's been absolutely dominated by AI ever since the release of ChatGPT in 2022, end of 2022. It's just been the dominant topic. And I think that, now we can safely say that AI is a transformative technology versus a transactional one, right? It's kind of been recognized, in fact, as one of the GPTs, which is general purpose technologies. So you kind of think the only real modern one that we can equate it to is the internet, right? Like 25 years ago, 30 years ago. And it's kind of got that prominence now, has AI. And I think it's interesting, like how we perceive that, right? Because it's often presented as this sort of what I think is like a false dichotomy between technology and human. Like we're kind of opposing forces almost. And I don't think that's the case. I think that there's a really great opportunity here for us to kind of collaborate with the technology, right? And my manager at Golin, Jeff Beringer, has this really great phrase of rather than AI, he talks about IA, which is intelligence augmentation. And it's kind of, I really love that because it's like the inversion, right? But what it talks about is humans. Look, we need humans, right? We're not going to get to this dystopian scenario where it's just machines, it's not the Terminator movie, right? That's not a reality that we're really going toward. We need humans to bring judgment, empathy, nuance, creative thinking, emotional intelligence. But AI brings us great things like the speed at which it can process things, the data capacities it has, the memory. And together, those kind of bring this amplified impact with, smarter, faster, scalable workflows from us both. So I'm really seeing that as been the major change that's impacting on L&D in the last few years.
Wow. Yeah, intelligence augmentation. That's a great way to capture the way that artificial intelligence can not just help us do the things that we need to do, but truly enhance our ability to be much more efficient, identifying areas where things we may not necessarily see, or blind spots that we particularly have within our day-to-day or our project, but being able to enhance our ability and make us that much more better at what it is that we do, and then the responsibilities that we have within an organization. So it makes it intelligence augmentation. I love the flip of that and the inverse of that. So now, with that said, we talked about the last changes in the last few years. Where do you see now the space headed within the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? Because there's a lot about these technologies that's unpredictable, right? Because if we go back to other general purpose technologies, there's some famously terrible predictions. Like Thomas Watson once said there would be 5 computers in the world, right? Famously, and obviously didn't turn out to be the case. And we're still like, we kind of need a bit of humility from our perspective, we just don't know. A lot of this, we're not sure in which directions it's going to go. In terms of in the next 5 to 10 years, though, I see the transition as being more towards this kind of idea of performance engineering. So if Rick, if we think of, your classic L&D theory here with the old Kirkpatrick model, right? So it talks about kind of people's reaction to training at the lowest level, right? Which is, if it was a workshop, often the reaction can be, hey, I like the workshop because they provided nice treats, or the coffee was good, or something really kind of superficial almost there. Then you go to the learning, right? Which L&D, I've always said, right? L&D is misbranded. It's very poorly branded because we talk about learning and development, but learning is only stage 2 on the Kirkpatrick. It's not, that's just, did we remember things? Can we, like pass a test almost, right? That again goes back to conventional education ideas. Whereas stages 3 and 4 on the Kirkpatrick go to impact, behavior change, right? So are we using AI as an example, are we using the tools? We might know about AI, we might know what it is, but are we actually using it? That's where you're looking at behavior change. And then beyond that, you're looking at results. So at Golin, that's client results, right? That's working with clients and applying AI, which we have been doing really successfully in recent times. So I see in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to be more explicitly moving toward this idea of performance engineering, right? Which is almost guiding people in terms of like how we actually produce those results. And I'll give you a quick example of this, like kind of conceptually almost, right? Is one of our, Rick, you and I both based in Chicago. So there was a gentleman whose name will be familiar to all of your listeners, I'm sure, Benjamin Bloom, who worked at the University of Chicago. He did a great study, which I think is really an important study in L&D in 1984, the 2 sigma problem. And the 2 sigma problem talks about how in a conventional classroom environment, be this childhood education or adult education, if you take someone at the 50th percentile, right? Let's say there's a class of 30. If you're bang in the middle, right, in terms of, attainment level, 50 percentile, with one-on-one tutoring, you can get to the 98th percentile. So Benjamin Bloom was able to empirically show that you can go from basically being middle of a class to top 2%, top of the class, essentially, with personal tutoring. And we've kind of known that forever. Like we all know, if you want to get good at something, you get a personal tutor. If I want to learn the piano, which I have no skill about, I'm terrible with all musical instruments, but I'd get a personal tutor because I'd recognize that would expedite my improvement, right? So we've known that. Now the challenge has always been scalability. You can't get 30 teachers in a classroom. It just doesn't work. Like it's just not possible, right? It's restrictions around that. But I think AI allows us to do that because you've got personal now kind of thought partners with AI who can guide you through these challenges in the workplace. So I think what we'll see is this kind of recalibration of skills that people have, and this idea that we have a kind of a tutor that can guide us to these outputs moving forward.
Wow. That was a very robust answer to that, because you capture not only an organization looking at learning and development and truly proving the impact from more than just smiley shapes to an actual shift to the actual business and driving successful business outcomes, but then also looking at how AI can come in, be that personal feedback reinforcement at scale to allow for subject matter, the reinforcement of the subject matter through, as you described, performance engineering at scale for the individual learner. If I understand correctly, if I'm repeating back to you, then that is a truly exciting. Well, if I'm repeating that back to you accurately.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it, Rick. And I think it just opens a lot of doors for us, right? Like Microsoft uses the term Copilot for one of its AI tools. And I think that's a really good analogy. You're still, to kind of extend that metaphor, you're still driving or flying, whatever, not to mix them. You're still in control, right? But you have a partner who would guide you there. And I do see that that's the kind of the change that we're going to see. You mentioned learning theory earlier, Rick, which I think is important here and kind of underpins a lot of this. It's this kind of constructionism idea where the output is the actual work, right? So you're not so much learning about something that you apply, you're actually doing it. And again, we can relate that back to Kirkpatrick, right? Is like actions and results in real time. So I see that as a really exciting and effective change in terms of how L&D functions kind of perform more broadly.
Yeah. Well, that truly is, it truly is exciting. So, and it's very validating to see you become a thought leader in this in this area and driving these results, not just on your day to day, but for your for Golin as well. All right. So to shift gears slightly, so as we talk about this direction and your career journey and where you have leading these initiatives for a global company. So then what inspired you or what helped develop you as we talk about the individual coaching? And when we talk about coaching, we also look at mentor and the impact of mentorship within our own professional journeys. So who have been your professional mentors that have helped you come to this point?
Yeah, I love that you asked this question because coming from the UK, I feel like there's a structural difference in terms of like organization hierarchy. In the UK, it's very hierarchical, like old school, right? So typically if you go into an organization, and I saw this up close when I worked in the UK, and I'm not meaning to say anything too derogatory to my good friends and brothers and sisters in the UK, but it is like the oldest person is the boss, right? That's just kind of how it's always been. Whereas the US, it's a lot more dynamic. Like you can be rewarded for doing good work and you can be elevated more quickly. I think they have a much more sort of like democratized sort of mobility system in the US, which I like. And to answer your question, Rick, I'd say Publicis, we had a great team. That includes yourself, Matt Hoff, and Carol Cinco, who I'd say probably has been my main mentor. She was my manager for a number of years and really learned a lot from Carol at Publicis Group. And another really good mentor, actually, I'll mention, when I worked for a trading company, a financial trading company, and I had my manager was actually the owner of the company, which was wild because, you know, Rick, that it typically in structure L&D, you're kind of under HR and there's like several layers to that, you know, in terms of the organizational system. So my manager was the owner of the trading company. So and his name is Tom Hutchinson. He was a great guy, really interesting, really smart guy. And what I learned from him really was I saw like almost like a secret garden. You know, in L&D, we can often be sort of insulated and we don't really see the business impact. When I was at this company, Belvedere Trading, I kind of saw directly what the training was doing in terms of business output, just because my manager was literally the owner. So that was an interesting experience that I learned a lot from.
Well, absolutely. So firstly, I know Carol, and I share the same sentiment, and I'm sure she will be absolutely delighted to hear that, and I'm sure also Thomas will be excited to hear that as well. So, all right. So then from there, so what do you think? So as we talk about the influence and the development, so then what do you see as the most important skill and talent right now?
Yeah, well, being based in AI, you'd probably expect me to say something along the lines of being technical and being able to program, but actually not at all. It's actually the opposite, really. There was a really interesting report that came out from the World Economic Forum only a few months ago that was showing, it was kind of projecting skill. It's like the future of jobs report, right? And it projects the important skills in 5 years' time. And to sort of summarize the sentiment of that analysis, it was that human skills are the biggest, right? Like AI and big data was actually number one. But other than that, the other skills were things like emotional intelligence, curiosity, creative thinking. And I really think that this is important because AI, as I mentioned earlier with this intelligence augmentation idea, right, can kind of amplify those skills, I think. So, you know, I remember at Publicis, Rick, we were both reading the Carol Dweck mindset book, right? And that to me is a really important aspect of this. My answer to the question would probably be adaptability. Curiosity would be a close second, but adaptability. And the reason I say that is there's so much change that we're encountering at the moment, and you kind of need a bit of a mental resilience to that. but also to have what's often referred to as an abundance mindset versus a scarcity mindset. A scarcity mindset is you're thinking, AI is going to take my job, or you're seeing the negative potential in a lot of these developments. But an abundance mindset would be the opposite of that, where you see opportunity versus danger. And I think I'll give like a real quick example of that, right? Is like in 1985 or whenever Microsoft Excel was released, I'm not sure the exact date, you can imagine like a CPA would have been like, oh no, my job is over. There'll be no more need for a CPA because now there's this thing, Microsoft Excel, it can do everything I do faster, quicker, etc. at scale. But actually, all these years later, 40 years later, we still have CPAs. They still have they still exist and they have a thriving profession. Excel has augmented what they do. It's changed, it's recalibrated what they do. It hasn't made them obsolete. It's just changed their job. And I think that mindset is applicable to almost any position now with AI. And so I think maybe kind of think of that as an example. And having that adaptability is probably the most important skill.
Absolutely. And it was something that you had also shared on LinkedIn as it relates to the shifts in how people are using AI. Because I've used AI and you and I spent a lot of time in Excel and to doing some of the advanced functions in DVA and using AI to help come up with some of that code. But now seeing that shift in terms of the trends towards actually the more human side of things and the more, one of the trends is using AI for actual therapy, particularly in communities where there isn't a lot of mental health resources. So you're seeing this real shift and this highlight of the need for the human skills, for the adaptability and the resilience, as you said, that can definitely help us just be better connected and to better work together.
Yeah, that's spot on. And that's what the report that you referenced as well, Rick. There was another report that was talking about how people use AI in 2025, a really comprehensive study from Harvard Business Review. And it's exactly what you just said, Rick. It's a transition from kind of technical to emotive is probably how you could characterize that. And you give a really great example there of for sort of, be it counseling or kind of advice or as a thought partner, those inputs are really valuable. And it's not just the kind of, oh, I can use it to write emails faster. It's a shift from efficiency to kind of almost life management, which is really interesting to see.
Absolutely. So you mentioned the Harvard Business Review. One of the other questions that we also ask our leaders is, so how do you stay current and where do you go for your industry thought news?
Yeah, great question. So I listen to a lot of podcasts, including the Learning Leader Spotlight podcast. And probably for AI specifically, there's one called the AI Show with a gentleman called Paul Reitzer and Mike Kaput as well as his kind of sidekick. They do a really great job of summarizing all of the activity that's going on, which is hard to keep up with. Let's be honest, it's kind of overwhelming for all of us to keep up. They do a really good job of summarizing that. So podcasts are kind of my go-to. I really love going to industry events. I get very energized by going to conferences. I've been lucky to been to a couple this year. And LinkedIn, just following people on LinkedIn, you like you mentioned earlier, you see these little snippets that you can apply to your job. I think it's a really great resource for insights.
Yeah, absolutely. I also get that energy from conferences and meeting other learning leaders and hearing the latest as it relates to what's going on, but then also talking and the connection. And then absolutely. And then following those people on LinkedIn and seeing the things that they're reading and who they're connected to. And you are also one of the people that I follow on LinkedIn, obviously. So with that said, so now we talked about industry news and staying current. One of our big things is we have a big, long reading list. So what are the books that you are reading and that you would recommend for emerging leaders in learning and development to read?
Yes. So I would say if anybody listening to this is interested specifically in AI, obviously that's been my focus as we've discussed. The best book, the thing that I always recommend, even over any training courses, honestly, if you want to learn about AI, there's a book called Co-Intelligence by a gentleman named Ethan Mollick, who's like a thought leader in this space. He's an academic, but he's written a really digestible and just really well organized book, which kind of breaks down AI, like the various functions that we've discussed here, Rick, that AI can fulfill. He does a great job of summarizing that. So I'd highly recommend Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mollick. In terms of more general L&D resources, I'm going to plug a book that I read many years ago and I kind of revisit. Unfortunately, it's not available in audio format as far as I can find, because I know you are as well, Rick, and I know Leanne, is your host is as well, is you like to consume audio books, and so do I. But there's a book called How People Learn, which is by a British gentleman named Nick Shackleton-Jones, who I would recommend you follow on LinkedIn. He's a very cerebral, smart guy with a lot of great insights. And he talked about a few of the things we've mentioned today, actually, the like education versus training, that kind of dichotomy that we kind of talked about, and also about like the need to be user-centric with your training versus kind of instructor-centric. And like he talks a lot about like learning design, which I'm not an instructional designer, but I try and factor those ideas into a lot of my training programs. I think Nick Shackleton-Jones is a really great person to follow, and his book is great. So check that out. How People Learn by Nick Shackleton-Jones.
Yeah, absolutely. How People Learn is a popular book. It's a popular book on our podcast. So definitely we give that some extra points. Co-Intelligent, but I don't follow him on LinkedIn, so I'm going to follow him on LinkedIn. Thanks for that recommendation, and also thanks for Co-Intelligence. That is not on our list, and we will make sure that gets added. And while I'm thanking you, I want to thank you for that shout out for listening and Learning Leader Spotlight being one of the podcasts that you listen to. So, with that said, I want to thank you, Joe, for being a guest on our podcast. Sincerely want to thank you. And so as you know, as a part of our podcast, we thank our guests by offering them a gift. So we want to offer you a gift as well. Training Pros is going to plant 5 trees in your name. So the charity that we work with is World Reforestation, planting trees where there are none in order to continue giving back and our commitment to sustainability. So as being a guest on our show, we're going to plant 5 trees in your name.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. I love that you guys do that. I think that's such a great initiative and proud to be involved in that. Thank you, Rick.
Yeah, thank you. And I agree with you completely. So with that said, thank you, Joe, for being on our show. And thank you for joining us for this episode of Learning Leader Spotlight.
Thanks for joining us for the latest episode of Learning Leader Spotlight, interviews with corporate L&D leaders. You'll find links in the show notes to any resources mentioned on today's show. If you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe so you never miss an episode and leave us a 5-star review.